What if Brexit didn't really mean Brexit? Nearly a decade after the UK voted to leave the EU, Britain is shaking hands with Brussels again. Cheaper food, fewer passport checks, more defense deals, and possibly a £9 billion economic boost. But here's the twist. Critics say this landmark deal looks like a quiet backtrack on Brexit. So, is the UK finally fixing its post Brexit problems or just trading sovereignty for survival? We explain.
It gives us unprecedented access.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced what he is calling a landmark agreement with the European Union. This wide ranging deal touches everything from food and defense to student exchanges and tourism. At the center of it is a plan to make food more affordable. By easing trade restrictions on British agricultural exports, the government says prices could come down for everyday consumers. The deal also includes a new security and defense pact. The UK and EU will now share more intelligence, work together on cybersecurity, and coordinate in maritime operations. One major win for the British industry: UK arms manufacturers can now join the EU's massive 150 billion euros rearmament program. That's part of a broader Western push to strengthen European defense, especially under the pressure from US President Donald Trump. Food exporters are particularly relieved. In 2023, the UK sold £14 billion worth of food and drink to the EU. That's more than half of the sector's overseas sales. The new agreement removes many post Brexit trade barriers, fewer checks on animals, reduced paperwork, and an end to bans on certain products. But there's a catch. Britain will now have to follow EU food safety rules. That means aligning with European standards, what's known as dynamic alignment, and accepting oversight from the European Court of Justice. Some critics see this as giving up UK control, but supporters argue it's a necessary compromise to keep trade flowing. On top of the economic gains, the UK is inching back into Europe's collaborative projects. British youth will once again be able to participate in the Erasmus student exchange program, and tourists will face fewer hassles too. British travelers will now be allowed to use e-gates at most EU airports, shortening queues at border controls. There's also movement on energy cooperation, including talks on linking up carbon pricing markets and electricity grids. The most divisive part of the agreement: fisheries. As part of the deal, EU boats will continue to have access to British waters for another 12 years. That's 3 times longer than what the UK initially offered. Fishing represents just 0.04% of the UK's economy, but it holds symbolic weight. Brexit was supposed to take back control of UK waters. Critics, including the Conservatives and Reform UK's Nigel Farage, says this is a complete surrender. Farage warned it could mean the end of the industry, while the Scottish Fishermen's Federation called the deal a horror show. That's the big question. The Conservative Party has slammed the agreement as turning the UK into a rule taker from Brussels again. They have vowed to undo it if they return to power. Still, Starmer has held the line on not rejoining the EU single market or customs union, but by signing onto EU food standards and court oversight. Some say the UK is back under Brussels' thumb, just without a seat at the table. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, Brexit has reduced UK trade flows by 15%. It is expected to cut long-term GDP by 4%. That's a hit of £100 billion per year. UK exports to the EU were down 18% in 2024 compared to 2019, even before the pandemic is taken into account. Business investment also took a hit, with levels 13% lower than they would have been under a Remain scenario. Brexiters had promised that leaving the EU would boost global trade, and while the UK has signed deals with the US and India, GDP growth has averaged just 0.64% since 2020. Starmer's government says the new agreement could add £9 billion or $12 billion to the UK economy by 2040. That's about 0.2% of national output. It's a small slice, but experts say it could help reverse some of Brexit's damage. Think tanks estimate a GDP boost of between 0.3% and 0.7% from this reset with the EU. Still, structural challenges remain: low productivity, weak public finances, and uncertain long term growth. So, will food get cheaper? Probably. Will the economy benefit? Modestly. But has Brexit really been reversed? That's up for debate. What's clear is this: the UK is edging closer to Europe again, not through a grand rejoining of the EU, but through a slow, sector by sector re entanglement. Whether you call it pragmatism or betrayal, this deal may just be the one of the most significant shift in UK EU ties since the referendum. Stay tuned, this story isn't over.